Let's begin today by looking at the greatest, most expensive lie you tell yourself every single day at work. How many times have you looked at a highly disappointing, bleeding red quarterly report, but somehow managed to squint hard enough to find the one obscure vanity metric that proved you were still winning? How often do you profoundly tell your team that you have an open door policy and want their honest feedback on a strategy, but subconsciously interrupt, debate, and intellectually bulldoze anyone who actually dares to disagree with you? How many times have you launched a product, pushed an initiative, or forced a cultural change and actively ignored all the blazing red flags simply because you had already invested too much time, money, and ego into it? We love to think of ourselves as deeply rational, highly logical, data-driven leaders. We tell our boards and our teams that we are objective. We think we are looking at the business landscape through a perfectly clear glass window. But the brutal truth is, most of us are staring into a funhouse mirror. We are making massive, life-altering, career-defining decisions based on a highly curated hallucination. And the higher you climb the corporate ladder, the thicker the glass of the funhouse mirror becomes. By the time data reaches a CEO or a senior executive, it has already been filtered, sanitized, and massaged by people whose primary goal is to keep you comfortable. If you're not careful, you end up leading from inside a bubble of your own design. This is the terrifying trap of cognitive blindness. Stay with me until the end of this episode. We are going to aggressively deconstruct the two silent assassins of modern leadership, confirmation bias and desirability bias. We are going to explore the dark evolutionary neuroscience of why your brain physically and chemically fights the truth, dive into the ancient Stoic philosophy of seeing reality nakedly, and I'll share a deeply painful, embarrassing story of a time my own wishful thinking almost completely derailed a business and cost me a lot of money. Welcome to the Age Experiment. I'm João and I am your host. If you have been searching for a leadership podcast that strips away the sterile corporate illusions and exposes the raw, messy psychology of how we actually operate as humans, you have finally found your home. This is not a standard self-improvement podcast about optimizing your calendar or drafting better emails. Today, we are doing deep cognitive surgery. We are going to expose the invisible psychological filters that blind you and learn how to finally see your reality, your team, and yourself with terrifying, liberating clarity. To understand how brilliant, highly educated leaders completely lose their grip on reality, we have to distinguish between two deeply human yet fundamentally different cognitive biases. Yes, we are going to human behavior now. They work together in the boardroom like a pair of coordinated assassins, but they attack your psyche from entirely different angles. The first assassin, confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the deeply ingrained psychological tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that perfectly confirms your pre-existing beliefs. When you suffer from confirmation bias, you stop acting like a scientist looking for the truth, and you start acting like a defense attorney building a case. You already know the verdict you want, so you aggressively cross-examine only the data that supports your ego, and you dismiss the rest as an anomaly. Think about how this plays out in hiring. You interview a candidate who went to your alma mater, or who reminds you of a younger version of yourself. Your brain instantly decides, I like them. From that second on, confirmation bias takes the wheel. You will highlight their mediocre answer as scrappy and confident, while completely ignoring massive red flags about their emotional intelligence. If you believe a certain employee of your team is lazy, you will completely ignore the 40 hours of brilliant focus work they did this week, and your brain will hyperfixate on the single email they answered 5 minutes late. You will use it as absolute proof that you were right all along. Confirmation bias is how we build an intellectual fortress to protect our ego from being wrong. The second assassin is the desirability bias. The desirability bias, also known in psychology as wishful thinking, is much more insidious because it is rooted in our deepest vulnerabilities. It is the tendency to believe a certain narrative is true simply because you desperately want or need it to be true, completely regardless of the objective evidence staring at your face. While confirmation bias protects your intellect, desirability bias protects your heart. You want the market to absolutely love your new expensive product. You want your toxic co-founder to magically change their behavior. You want the company culture to be deeply healthy and vibrant. Why? Because the alternative, facing a massive financial failure, going through the trauma of firing a friend, or standing in front of the mirror and admitting your culture is broken on your watch, is simply too emotionally painful to endure. So your brain creates a coping mechanism. You look at a burning building and convince yourself it's just a warm, cozy campfire. You inject a lethal dose of toxic positivity into your leadership style. When a leader is infected by both of these biases simultaneously, they create a reality distortion field. They construct an impenetrable, soundproof echo chamber where truth becomes an enemy and strategy goes to die. But why do we do this? Why would highly intelligent, well-meaning, educated leaders actively and systematically deceive themselves? To find the answer, we have to drop the business jargon and look directly at the biology of the brain. Here's the most important thing you will learn today. Your brain is not designed to find the objective truth. It was never designed for that. Your brain is designed to keep you safe, to keep you inside the tribe, and to conserve metabolic energy. When you encounter a piece of raw data that proves your deeply held strategy is fundamentally wrong, your brain does not process that information as a simple math problem. It processes it as an existential physical threat. When your worldview is challenged, you experience what psychologists call an amygdala hijack. We have spoken so many times about it here. Your amygdala, the ancient threat detection center of your brain, fires immediately like that. Your heart rate elevates, your vision literally narrows, you experience a spike of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Your brain cannot tell the difference between a direct attack on your ego in a boardroom and a direct attack from a predator on the savannah. It feels like you are going to die, so you fight back with defensive rationalizations. Conversely, when you find that one tiny data point that confirms your bias, or when a yes man on your team tells you that your terrible idea is actually brilliant, your brain rewards you. It hits you with a massive, soothing dose of dopamine. We are biologically addicted to the comfort of being right, and we are biologically, physically allergic to the pain of being wrong. If you are human resources professional, you know exactly how this neurobiology destroys corporate culture. When a CEO or a leadership team is chemically addicted to desirability bias, the entire organization quickly learns that telling the truth is a punishable offense. The messengers are constantly shocked. So what happens? The team stops reporting the problems. They start producing what I call watermelon status report. They look bright, shiny, and green on the outside, but when you cut them open, they are bleeding red on the inside. The profound silence in your company is not alignment, it's a trauma response, it's self-preservation. Now, to cure this biological blindness, we cannot just rely on more spreadsheets, of course. We must look to the ancient Stoics, who were masters of cognitive behavior hygiene thousands of years before the term was ever invented. The philosopher Epictetus famously said, "It is not things that upset us, but our judgment about things." The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius had a rigorous daily psychological practice of stripping things down to their absolute naked reality. He intentionally trained his mind to strip away all desirability, all prestige, and all emotional narrative from the objects and events around him. If he was served a wildly expensive, luxurious dinner of roasted pig at a royal banquet, he wouldn't let his ego get caught up in the luxury. He would train his mind, his brain, to look at the plate and say, "This is the dead corpse of a pig." If he poured a cup of the finest, most expensive vintage wine in the empire, he would look at it and say, "This is simply fermented grape juice." He looked at the purple robes of royalty and reminded himself, "This is just sheep's wool dyed with shellfish blood." He did this to aggressively train his mind to see the objective, undeniable truth, completely untainted by the desires, the status, and the blind biases of the ego. As an H2H leader, you must practice this exact same ruthless Stoic hygiene. When a major project is failing, you must catch yourself when you start to say, "The market just doesn't understand our genius yet." That is desirability bias speaking. You must strip the narrative away and say, "We spent 6 months and $2 million building a product that people do not want to buy." When a top executive resigns, you cannot say, "They betrayed us, they weren't loyal to us." That would be confirmation bias. You must say, "A human being chose to trade their labor for a different opportunity." You must separate the objective math of the situation from the emotional drama of your ego. The truth will set you free, but I promise you, first, it will deeply offend you. All right, now I would like to step out of the high level theory and share a very, very painful, deeply embarrassing moment where I fell completely, utterly victim to desirability bias. Years ago, back when I was still living in Brazil, I decided to start a business with a group of close friends. The idea was to create a t-shirt brand featuring highly unique, disruptive designs. We had brilliant ideas for that. I was completely, utterly in love with the concept. I poured my savings, my late nights, and my entire identity into making it happen. I was in love. Because I wanted this business to work so badly, and because I desperately wanted to build this dream alongside my friends, desirability bias took over the steering wheel. I was so blinded by the romance of the idea that I actively, willfully ignored a barrage of blazing red flags. There were early signs that our work ethics didn't align. There were massive, uncomfortable disagreements about the financial structure and the division of labor and how we would move the business forward. There were crucial moments when commitments were simply dropped, but my brain did exactly what brains are wired to do. It hallucinated safety. Every time a red flag popped up, my confirmation bias would step in to excuse it. "They're just busy right now. They're just going through normal startup growing pains." Once the website launches and we make our first sales, everything will smooth out. I didn't want to face the incredibly uncomfortable truth that the partnership was fundamentally fractured from day one. To accept that truth would mean admitting the dream was dead, and I simply couldn't stomach the emotional pain of that loss. So I forced us to keep pushing forward, pouring more of my own money into a leaky bucket. The ultimate cost was devastating. The business inevitably collapsed under the weight of its own dysfunction. I lost a significant amount of money, but much more painfully, the fallout fractured those friendships. I lost all of that strictly because I refused to see the reality of the partnership as it actually was, insisting instead on seeing it only as I wished it to be. Breaking free from these biases requires a profound, painful evolution in your leadership maturity. It requires adopting what philosopher Karl Popper called the falsification principle. Instead of constantly scanning the horizon for evidence that proves you're right, you must actively hunt for evidence that proves you're wrong. Most traditional command and control leaders view being wrong as a humiliating failure of intelligence. They view changing their minds as weakness. H2H leaders view being wrong as the rapid, glorious acquisition of new data. You must cultivate an organizational environment where objective reality is the highest possible currency. You have to actively, publicly reward the people who bring you the ugly, uncomfortable truth. You have to build a challenge culture that is not toxic, but is fiercely dedicated to reality. When someone walks into your office, interrupts your presentation, and shatters your desirability bias by telling you your plan is failing, your biological response will be defensiveness. But your leadership response must be, "Thank you. Thank you for protecting my blind spot." All right, now the H2H experiment of the week. This week, I want you to actively hack your own neurobiology. intentionally. We are going to force your brain out of its comfortable, dopamine-soaked echo chamber. The experiment is called the Red Team Pre-Mortem. Look at the biggest, most expensive, or most important project, strategy, or new hire you are currently pushing. The one you are most personally excited about. Call a meeting with your core team. Give them absolute psychological immunity. Tell them that for the next hour, titles do not exist. Then give them this specific prompt. I want everyone to close their eyes and fast forward exactly 12 months into the future. We are sitting in this exact room, but this project has been a catastrophic, unmitigated failure. It completely collapsed. We lost the money, we lost the customer, and we lost our reputation. I want you to spend the next 10 minutes writing down in silence exactly why it failed. By shifting the frame to the future and assuming the failure has already happened, you do a magic trick on the brain. You instantly bypass desirability bias. You remove the social pressure to be optimistic and supportive. You give your team full, unadulterated permission to unleash the brutal objective truth about the cracks in your foundation. Once they finish writing, go around the room and read the autopsies. Take notes, breathe through the discomfort. Do not defend yourself. Do not explain your rationale. Just listen to the sound of reality. Now, let's wrap up this episode. Leadership is not the magical ability to force the world to conform to your desires. True leadership is the profound, quiet courage to accept the world exactly, nakedly as it is, and then taking responsibility for making it better. The biases in your brain will always, until the day you die, try to build a comfortable, padded prison of illusions around you. It takes a warrior's daily discipline to keep breaking the glass of the funhouse mirror. You know, there are thousands of leadership podcasts out there, but our unwavering mission is to make the H2H experiment the most deeply honest, psychologically rigorous personal growth podcast and self-improvement podcast in your rotation. If this episode challenged your thinking today, if it made you squirm just a little bit, I want to invite you to continue this journey of radical self-awareness. Follow our latest reflections, deep psychological dives, and ongoing discussions on LinkedIn and Substack. Explore more H2H experiments, tools, and frameworks for breaking cognitive bias at theh2hexperiment.com. Or join our global community on the ECXO platform. And for the full comprehensive roadmap on transforming your leadership from the inside out, check out the HX Revolution book series available right now on Amazon. We also have another 2 books launched on Amazon about leadership. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeking the uncomfortable naked truth. And thank you for having the courage to take off the blindfold, because you cannot fix a reality that you refuse to see. Thank you once again. See you next time. Bye.